Hello, and welcome to the Podcast of Champions. I'm your host, Lord Deathman. I know it's been a while since I've been in the moderator's chair on the show, but I'm looking forward to a nuanced and hopefully significant conversation about a really important issue that's happened as far as the MCU goes and one of its actors that was supposed to play a major role in the upcoming saga. Of course, I'm talking about the talented and incredibly versatile Jonathan Majors. He's been in several films. You've probably seen him in things like Hostels and The Five Bloods. He's been obviously in the MCU as the character Kang and played several variants on that characters, both on the big screen and in the small screen. Recently, like so many actors of his generation, Mr. Majors was caught up in, in a scandal. There's no other way to say it. He was found guilty of assault and harassment and was a participant in a very high profile trial in New York. On today's show, what we'd like to talk about is a little bit of everything. We want to talk about the guilty verdicts surrounding Majors. What were the crimes that he actually committed? Did it warrant Marvel removing him from the MCU literally within a half an hour of the announcement that he'd been found guilty? Is there some kind of a road to redemption, or does Marvel Studios have to look for a new major villain or recast the old villain? So obviously, this is going to be a discussion that's slightly different than what we usually talk about in terms of reviewing some of the TV shows that come out in the popular media about these franchises. This is going to be an open discussion. We hope to keep it. I have some of the smartest and most sensitive champions on this call, so I'm not worried about any of that kind of stuff. But we do hope that you'll be open to listening out there in the audience, as we might touch on, some greater societal problems as we talk about this case. So without further ado, I want to introduce my panel, who's going to be offering me support in this discussion, starting with the Grandmaster himself. How are you doing today? Are you ready to talk about this incredibly complex topic, or do you have some simple takes for us?
Yes, I'm doing great, and yeah, I have major issues with this whole thing, and I'm looking forward to discuss this. And yeah, Disney, I'm coming for you.
Oh wow. Okay. We've set the tone. Merv, how are you doing today? Are you up for this?
Fantastic.
Outstanding,
And yes,
outstanding.
I'm in.
Indeed. Taylor, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
Excellent, excellent. And last but certainly not least, on audio only, we do have Loki's mom. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just wonderful, and it's a major topic. So
Right, we got to have a little levity in this conversation. So thanks for that one. That being said, you guys know the drill out there in the audience. We are going to be talking all things MCU, all things Jonathan Majors, all things Kang. So you will hear plot points to MCU movies, and if you haven't been fully caught up, this is your chance to sort of slip back into the multiverse and come back when you're ready for the discussion. That being said, I want to jump right in and pull no punches with the very first question that I have for the entire panel. I want to start with you, Grandmaster. Uh, did this was this a fair verdict on the part of Marvel Studios? Do you think that it was necessary to remove Jonathan Majors from the part of Kang based on the verdict that was announced out of New York a couple of weeks ago?
No, simple. Jonathan Majors is a human being. Human being make mistakes. I'm not going to go into the. I didn't follow the scandal that much because basically I don't care about celebrity lives at all. But he's a human being. He makes mistakes. He was found guilty of a mistake, and a major mistake. It's not something I think of lightly. But people make mistakes, and they should never, ever, 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 ever lose a job over a mistake they make, as long as he's not in jail, as far as I know. So, or at least not for a long time. No, he should not be fired by Disney Marvel Studios, in my view.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for sharing that. And moving on to our next champion, who I'm really anxious to hear your particular opinion, Taylor. Was it justified? Should they have fired Jonathan Major based on what you know about the case and what happened in the incident?
No, but they had no choice. And I'll explain. First of all, it's too bad that it went as far as it did. No, 9 times out of 10 in cases like this, one of two things happen. Either the alleged victim drops the charges because it's too much of a hassle to go through the whole trial process, or they get an offer to convince them to drop the charges, or the accused pleads guilty to a lesser charge or the least possible charge, pays a fine, does some community service, something like that. And in that situation, it usually gets forgotten about. And Disney probably could have gotten away with not firing him at that point. But with this, and I'm saying Disney because Disney owns Marvel, and
Yep.
it reflects on Disney. But Disney had to fire this man who was convicted, and it's a misdemeanor conviction, which means it wasn't even intentional. But he was convicted of assault and harassment of a woman. Meanwhile, Disney fired a woman who didn't commit any crime. She merely had an opinion. Her name is Gina Carano. So how could Disney possibly keep this guy employed after he's convicted of crimes like that?
Right. You make a compelling argument there. Is there any road back for Jonathan Majors?
No, I don't believe so. Not with Disney. Not in the role of Kang.
Even sometime down the line, and I'm really not trying to stretch this out, but let's say he goes on an apology tour. We get more details that come out later on. Would you consider doing something like a James Gunn where he was fired temporarily and then kind of brought back on when this all dies down?
I would, but I don't believe the powers that be at Disney and Marvel will.
Wow. Wow. So the pronouncements are grim so far. Well, I shouldn't say all grim. But that being said, let's continue on talking to the rest of the panel. Again, very serious discussion here. Not our usual lighthearted fare. But Merv, I'm very interested in what you have to think. Was what Marvel Studios did as far as firing Jonathan Majors warranted in your opinion? And do you see a way back if indeed you do believe that they were justified in letting him go?
Yeah, I do believe it was warranted. I mean, it's their decision. I mean, they can let go of talent or whatever to their own. It doesn't need to be anything like this. If they just don't think he's the right fit, they could have dropped him, right? So, with certain career paths, public image is very important, and this is a big hit to Jonathan Major's public image. No matter what you think or what you feel, there's going to be people out there that will not like Jonathan Majors and will decide that they're going to boycott his movies or not go see his movies because of this incident. So I don't blame any corporation or whatever from stepping away from that and saying we don't even want to deal with the drama. And I do think it's a little bit easier if it's not, I don't want to say Kang. I don't think Kang was like to the level of like a Tony Stark in the universe yet.
Right.
Not saying he wasn't leading that way, or not saying they weren't trying to revolve this entire next phase around him. But I do think like it hadn't caught on yet, so it's easier to make that decision now as opposed to 3 or 4 years from now, whenever there's an Avengers movie centered around him, and it's like, what do you do now? It's probably a lot harder down the road than it is right now. And not saying they still won't use the character Kang, but they may replace. I mean, they're clearly going to replace Jonathan Majors if they even decide to keep using Kang. So I don't think. I mean, it's all a business choice, right? It's all in whatever they think. I doubt they're sitting there like with the morality stick ready to beat them. But it's like they see this as a potential loss of money due to the public image of one of their lead actors at this point, so they decided to cut ties. I can't really blame them for that in this instance. This isn't like a mechanic getting a DUI and getting fired from being a mechanic. Like, there's nobody gonna boycott that mechanic. You know what I mean? This is very different situation. This is celebrity status, and we've seen this before with other celebrity types, like sports players, actors, actresses, whatever. So yeah, I don't really fault the studio here. Whether there's a path back, I mean, probably not in the foreseeable future, just because unless information comes out that
Right.
this is all wrong, you know what I mean? But in the foreseeable future, like, the public isn't going to forget in today's society, and that's probably 99% of the reason that they're doing this, that they've done it already, is because the public image of Jonathan Majors is currently mixed at best, put it that way. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't see him returning as Kang or any part of a Disney product anytime soon.
And that could be the key phrase here, anytime soon. But we have seen people come back from even worse scandals after a period of time, and good behavior can usually drive people to sort of have them return to the fold. But that being said, Grandmaster, you had a follow up on all of this. And I'd love to get your thoughts on some of the
Yeah.
harsher.
When you, when you talk about comebacks and stuff like that, the MCU was built on a comeback kit. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. I mean, he had also his trouble and wasn't really like, say, pick of the week when they cast him as Iron Man back in the day. Uh, so yeah, indeed, maybe not right away, but Jonathan Majors is not done acting or being is not beyond redemption in my view because of it. Robert Downey Jr. is the perfect example of that.
Very true. I don't want to start comparing the crimes of those two actors, but they obviously were both convicted in courts of law. I believe Robert Downey Jr. actually even served time or some limited amount of time or community service for the crimes he was involved in. And went on to but I think the difference here, Grandmaster, that I'm trying to communicate is that Robert Downey Jr. had come off of that apology tour and had those years of sobriety, and was turning things around at the time that he had gotten hired for the Iron Man role, which he's become iconic in. Whereas this is kind of midstream in Jonathan Major's career, and it is a very fresh set of indictments, so forth and so on. But I only bring that up to point out the differences here in their two scenarios.
Yeah, understood. But I'm just saying that there's a little bit of hypocrisy here. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. If I recall correctly, Robert Downey Jr. actually spent a whole year in prison. Anyone out there in the audience in the comments, if I'm wrong, go ahead and put that in there in the video, just so that I can redeem our RDJ's um, his reputation here. But before we go any further in discussion, we certainly have to get the opinion of one of the greatest champions on the panel, Lokismom. I really want to know what you think. Was Disney really just warranted? Did they absolutely have to make this as a business decision? Could they have just stayed quiet about it and not made a huge announcement that they were letting him go? What do you think of the situation in general?
Yeah, I'm sort of with Merv. I think from a business standpoint, they have to keep going, and they've already had a lot of stoppages and issues and whatnot. And I think the fans at this point are kind of, well, hey, we all got problems. Disney, get your act together, and or Marvel, whichever you want to say it. I feel bad because man, Majors was really good in that role. I mean, it's just going to be a huge loss. And I hated it. I mean, I was really my fingers crossed, even though I don't think there was an issue that had he done that. I mean, what now? He said, she said type deal. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would agree that they have to do it. I was thinking if this were a local weatherman and his wife, and then it all came out in a scandal on TV, and Well, the station would be justified in firing that weatherman. I don't think I think the audience would be calling in and say, "Why do you still have that guy on?" Pointing at the temperatures on the screen and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I hate it. The comparison to Gina Carano, I think that's true. You can't say, well, they fired this person over here for this or this, but they let Jonathan Majors get away with beating up a woman. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's absolutely. I think you know.
And
Go ahead.
I no, and you would definitely coming from the female perspective here, as these crimes were perpetrated against a woman and constituted domestic violence. That being said, though, when you look closely at the charges, these are misdemeanor charges, so they didn't
Well,
even
it's
to felonies, and as misdemeanors, they were even the jury admits that he unintentionally
mhm.
inflicted these injuries or this damage onto Grace Jabari. Is there really just no room here for forgiveness or
well, Major should have controlled himself better. I mean,
in
it
many
was
different
unintentional.
respects?
I didn't mean to do it, honey. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I'll never do it again. Come on. I've heard that before. I've been at the end of domestic abuse. So, yeah, I mean, so from that standpoint, I have a hard time saying like, well, why? No, we can't let this guy go forward right now. As far as his career goes, I hope he gets past this. I hope I wouldn't. Let's put it this way: if they did cast him to be, Kang, I wouldn't not watch. I would go ahead and watch it. That's not going to stop me. But that's just me talking. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a horrible situation, and but yeah, you can't fire Carno, and you can't fire what they did to Kevin Spacey. I mean, I think it was sexual assault or underage sexual assault that he was accused of, which is I don't know if you want to put them on, crimes on a level, but however you want to balance that out. But yeah, they just really just drug him through hell, ripping his career away from him over that. Um, hey, maybe we should rethink how we treat people and how we expect. We just have this thing in our country where you make one mistake, and and I don't mean a little mistake, like if but something really like you were saying, like Robert Downey Jr. And I definitely remember because I was a big fan of when he came out when he was young and making all those movies back in the '90s and whatnot. And but then that whole drug thing, and it kind of went on and it wasn't just the drug thing. He would not show up to court. He would be arrogant in court. He made all these, so he just really made it worse for himself.
Right.
So and then when he did come out of jail, as Lord Deathman says, he had this long, where he built his career back up.
Right.
He regained the trust of the audience,
He had
and
a long
he
period
has
of
really,
time where he
yeah,
wasn't involved in any controversies and
right,
he was willing to
right.
do supporting role work. He did any kind of work that would allow him to build his career back up, brick by brick. It was a
And
really
he didn't whine, and he didn't go around, oh, woe is me, I was treated unfairly, and yada yada. And he didn't do any of that stuff. He really was just very a class act about it. So I think, yeah, his redemption, I think, was and reward for that, I think, was well deserved. But Majors, hey, he just it's I'm gonna say it's gonna be like 75% of business decision, really.
right.
So I can't really blame them for that. They need to keep their product going, and you got a person that's out. Then hey, what do? If it's football, you replace the player. You don't wait for him to get well and come back. So anyway,
Indeed. And this filmmaking is a team sport. So thank you for those notes, Loki's mom. I want to go to a quick follow up from Taylor in terms of the discussion. What's on your mind?
Yeah, in terms of hypocrisy, that there's tons of it. Hollywood in general, Disney included, they love to make movies and TV shows where they um, try to make us feel guilty or criticize society as a whole for not giving ex-cons a chance and how hard it is for ex-cons to redeem themselves and get jobs. But it affects their bottom line 30 minutes later, the guy is fired. You know, um, and then as far as Majors goes, I haven't read every interview and every article and everything, but to my knowledge, he's still claiming he's innocent and has not apologized or said I made mistakes. And again, I may be wrong about that. I haven't read everything. So he seems to be kind of stubborn about it this point. He's convicted. Maybe he's still trying to appeal, so he can't really say anything. I don't know at this point. But as far as I'm concerned, the conviction is what it is. He's guilty in the eyes of the law as of right now. The other part is during the trial, some stuff was entered into evidence that paints him as not a nice person. Now, what's that? Someone in Hollywood is not a nice person? I'm shocked. This has never happened before. Yeah, they're all not nice people, but it's out there, the public. And again, this is why it's so sad that it went all the way to trial, because none of that stuff would have been out there in the public if he had just copped a plea and said, I'm sorry, and did an apology tour. But he didn't. So there's a lot of stuff that he would have to get over and do himself in order to come back at this point.
I tend to agree with you strongly there. There's also a difference in attitude between RDJ and Majors in terms of how they're both handling their respective situations. I do recall Robert Downey Jr. being very contrite. There was a sense of him recognizing that he did have problems surrounding substance abuse, and he wanted help. He reached out for help. Whereas looking at some of the post conviction material that's come out about Majors, having watched snippets of the interview that he had done, I think it was for Good Morning America, Majors does seem somewhat defiant. He doesn't seem like someone who wants to take full responsibility for what went on. I think he wants to take some, but he's also very focused on saying that there's responsibility that's external to him as well. And that may be true, but it honestly never really helps your case in the public eye, if you're kind of not willing to take the full weight of the responsibility for those incidents. So I want to open up just the table to anyone on the panel that has any more that they'd like to add to this. I mean, do you feel that perhaps race contributed to where Majors is in terms of his situation? I personally don't think that that's a factor, although I will admit that in terms of the length of time that he might have to spend in the penalty box, race could play a part in that. It's usually shorter for white actors. I think that that's fair to say. But that being said, I think we do have some consensus, except for the minority viewpoint here from Grandmaster, that Disney essentially had to make this decision. They had to remove Jonathan Majors, even though he is an incredibly talented actor. I mean, there's no denying his work in films like The Five Bloods, Devotion, the Unseen Magazine Dreams, which people said was Oscar bait from frame one. I remember seeing him in Hostels is when he first came onto the radar for me in 2017 as Corporal Henry Woodson. That was a very memorable role. But that being said, I think we've discussed the major situation here, and that's the thrust of our podcast. But there are other topics to discuss, which is moving forward with the franchise that we know and love, the MCU. It's taken quite a few hits recently, body blows, lots of critical derision. We've had flat out bombs come out in terms of some of the releases. And one could say that Marvel Studios really couldn't afford a Jonathan Majors on top of all of that. But my next very pointed question for the panel is we're going to have to talk about recasting versus just moving on from Kang and this multiverse storyline. The multiverse storyline hasn't gotten the best reception from general audiences. I think that there still might be confusion or just flat out negative viewpoints in terms of the story and how that's unfolding, and it seems unfocused to a lot of fans. But I want to start with someone who could probably give us a lot of historical context on recasting in general in film and television. That has to be Mr. Taylor here. Um, Do we just put someone else in the green and purple and move on? Or do we just have to kind of bury this story in the sand and get to a whole new saga?
Well, as you said, of course, recasting is nothing new. It happens all the time in Hollywood and always has. As far as the Marvel's way forward, though, I mean, right now, it's obvious just from what we see in the press and what we see in the products coming out that right now they are kind of rethinking and trying to reset what they're doing. So it all depends on what their new plan is. If they have a plan, a good plan for a good story that needs Kang in it, then I believe they need to recast him immediately. If their plan is to scrap the story that they were currently moving towards and do something else that doesn't require Kang, then then it doesn't hurt anything if they don't recast because they don't need the character anymore.
Right. All good points. And I do tend to agree with you, but I want to paint a scenario. So let's say we do recast Kang, and let's say that there's a multiverse story that's strong enough to support him. We can go forward with Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. What if we replace Kang with a white actor? And I'm not saying this to race bait or to cause unnecessary drama. Do we think that that's going to cause some blowback in the fandom in terms of just trying to take a black actor out of the picture, out of the presentation generally for the portrayal of Kang? Or do we need to stay on race and sort of make sure that it is a black actor? I don't think Kang's race is particularly um necessary to telling stories about him, but how would you feel about that, Taylor?
It wouldn't matter to me at all who they recast him with because of the multiverse story, and they'll say it's a variant. I mean, there's an alligator Loki in the MCU, so it really doesn't matter. Now, if they want to say for continuity, this is not a variant; it's the same variant, it's the same character,
Right.
um, just a different actor. Which is normally what happens when you when you recast somebody because you're not in a multiverse. You don't have that excuse. You just say, okay, this is the same guy. Audiences understand that this is a different actor playing the same role. I do not think for one second that Marvel or Disney would ever even consider, though, uh, casting a white person to replace him at this point, just because of the way Hollywood um, uh, politics work at this point in history.
Right. Right. Thank you for that, Taylor. I am going to now solicit Merv's opinion on this. Do we need to recast Kang? Do we need someone with someone to put on the blue paint and forget the race? So he'll just be a blue dude. And is it worth recasting him, or do we just need to move on to a different villain and a different story for the saga?
I kind of agree with Taylor in that if they know what story they want to tell here, because Kang has what, 3 appearances if you count Loki season 1, season 2, and Ant-Man, essentially. But I don't even know where his story is going up to now. That's why I think it's easy to just kind of shy away from Kang at the moment. But if they have a story and they know where it's going and what they want to do with it and they expect it to be good, then yeah, I'm all for a recast. But at this point, I don't even know where the story's going other than the Council of Kangs that we saw at the end of Ant-Man 3. But who knows what ramifications that could be. And then you could easily just write that away with the end of Loki season 2, where they're like, yeah, we got him under wraps. And that's the end of that. So, at this point, I still think it's just so early in the Kang story that it's easy to go one way or the other. You could shelve this, you could forget about it for a while. You can come back to it later in several years and say, "Oh yeah, remember this?" With a different actor or the same actor. Maybe he's done his whatever his tour of redemption and he comes back and everyone's happy about it by that point. Maybe that's the story. But personally, I don't know. I just want it to be written well. I'm perfectly okay just because I don't really know where the Kang story goes or what it means for the Marvel universe as a whole. I'm perfectly fine just shelving it and moving on to something else and just kind of ignoring all the potential pitfalls that you might run into by recasting, or especially recasting with a white actor. I think that would be 100%, regardless of what I think. Because again, I'm similar with the Taylor. I don't care at all. But
Right.
there's people out there that would care, and they would immediately see that as a sign of racism and that sort of thing. Oh, you ran the black guy out of town, and now you're replacing him with a white guy. Whether justified or not, that story is going to happen. Like, there's going to be articles all about that. So to avoid that is as important as it is to avoid Jonathan Majors for Disney at that point. You know what I mean? So I definitely don't see that, at least for the time being, unless you can explain it. It's comic books. There's, if there's a a scene with all the Kangs and there's one white one, you know what I mean? Like, hey, who's that? It's whatever at that point. But I'm not going to rewrite their whole story for them. But personally, as long as they write it well, I don't really care which way it goes. If they want to continue with the Kang thing, if they already have it mapped out where they want to go, or if they want to drop it and move on to, like, Doom, I know is a hot up and comer, in this universe. Like, everyone's waiting for Doom to happen, and I just hope it lands. But
Right.
if that's not now, if that's in the future, that's fine too.
Indeed. Well articulated, and you actually put a slightly new context around the discussion for this. So as I move on to Loki's mom to get her thoughts on this, I really I want to put it this way. It does seem like there's a damned if you do or damned if you don't sort of aspect to this recasting. So if you decide that you want to find another talented black actor to take over the role of Kang, people might say on one side, well, why didn't we open this up? Why it doesn't seem like the race of the character really matters. We could have gotten anyone in there, right? And they've done race swapping with other popular Marvel characters. So there's that side of the argument. But if you put in a character of a different race, then you have probably people stealing all the air in the room by saying, well, why is he a white guy now? It almost feels like it might be better to just sidestep this whole Kang and multiverse situation, move on from the multiverse story altogether, rather than having to go through recast gate, which is something that they're kind of still reeling from when it comes to Black Panther and the controversies surrounding Chadwick Boseman. Well, not Chadwick Boseman being a controversial figure, but just the controversy of deciding not to recast him for the follow-up Wakanda Forever. So hopefully there was a question somewhere in there for you, Loki's mom, for you to parse out. But what do you think? Recast or just move on to a different saga and story?
Um, well, I like the multiverse. I like where it's going. I do think that is there not a scenario down the road or where you're going to have like a big mashup of Avengers, maybe variants Avengers against each other or something. I think that was in the comic books. There was that story. I think that may be where they're headed. So I mean, really, they're going to have to keep Kang in the story because he's pivotal to it. He's the general of his side of the big fight. Um, so I would say recast. That's the most logical thing to do if they stay with the storyline. Even if they have to change it up a little bit, I think they can do that far easier than just totally scrapping everything they've done and just rewriting everything from this point. That's they've had to do that in the past and it hasn't turned out real well. Once they get a momentum going on a storyline and they're into that and they're thinking in those terms and they've got all these things down the road planned, and then they have to, I mean, I can see they got a lot of logistical problems with it. Um, so yeah, I would say just treat the fans like they're adults. Just hey, just don't just recast. Here's the new guy that's going to play Kang. Yes, leave him African American because I think that would be too jarring to do that. To change it up that much. Uh, I'm not sure who Major's level. I'm sure there's some actors out there they can pull from if they have to go to England, like they do for most of the actors.
Hmm.
That part I don't really have a problem with as far as what their story it goes down the line because whatever that's a couple years away, but Um, yeah, as far as just recasting, I think yeah, we have to remember African Americans are Marvel fans too, and they have their favorite characters, and that they identify with and everything, and just like everybody else. So yeah, I would say just go ahead and recast, and just I think if they do that, I think everybody will be fine with it. To tell you the truth, I don't think with Bozeman, that was a different situation. That was a very very emotional type thing. um, People felt a great loss there because he was so wonderful in that part, on top of everything. And he was so young, and passed away. And so yeah, I mean, it was a totally different. I think it's sort of unfair to compare the two situations.
Indeed. Well, thank you for those notes in terms of the recast versus move on sort of dichotomy here, or the choice that's in front of Marvel Studios. Last but certainly not least, I want to get the Grandmaster's take on this. Where do you stand? Again, it's not a. It sounds like there are easy choices in front of Marvel Studios here, but there's pluses and minuses depending on the direction they go in.
Yeah. Personally, I would have liked to see that they didn't even start the multiverse story, but now we're in it. I think they should see it through. Therefore, in my view, they need to recast Kang with somebody who looks sort of like him. Um, and I don't see another way, because if they abandon this story now, basically they throw away like 2 3 years of storytelling. Uh, I get what Taylor's saying. They are reviewing what they're doing anyway at the moment. But I like to hope, or I like to see that they are reviewing how to fix the multiverse in terms of multiverse saga in terms of quality, and not so much abandon the multiverse saga, because that would really disappoint me. But yeah, if they did, it's not that I don't wouldn't understand it, but I would be disappointed with it. But yeah, I would like them to see. I would like them to recast the role of Kang. The, to me, that would be the best option.
Okay. So before I sort of get to the verdict for the panel on this, I just want to take a quick follow up from Loki's mom. You had something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I've got a question for the panel. Um, about the multiverse. Let's forget about Marvel for a minute. Do you not feel like you live in a multiverse? I mean, with everything, I don't want to get political here. I don't want to get into specifics, but with everything as topsy turvy as things have been for the last decade or so, I mean, and it just seems like it just keeps churning, and there's a lot of chaos out there. I mean, we're all on, we're polarized. We're pushed. It's like we're spinning. It's like a centrifuge, and we're just pushed to the sides.
Well,
And
I think I see
yeah,
what you're
yeah,
getting at here.
and that's just what I want to do. How do you? I mean, just in your own life,
I feel
do you,
like I'm in the underverse as a as a Death Lord. But guys, we'll take this as a bonus question. Grandmaster, are you living in a multiverse?
I certainly hope not. There should only be one version of me, otherwise the multiverse is really in trouble.
What about you, Merv? Multiverse or other?
Yes, I'm from the alternate dimension where it was the Berenstain Bears, not the Berenstain Bears. Sorry.
Good one. Good one. Taylor, which universe do you hail from?
This one. I am born and raised on Earth 616. There's only one universe that I live in. Yes.
Indeed. Indeed. But not to make light of the question, I do think I understand what Loki's mom was getting at. These are uncertain times, and it is sometimes, with the cadence, the pace of the news that you're getting, where it falls in terms of its truthfulness, it is sometimes you can think you're living in a multiverse, but We, the members of the podcast of champions, would like to tell you that you are right here on Earth 616 and you are safe with us. So have no fear.
Well, I mean, when you think about now going back to Marvel, and I brought this up before. Look at all the chaos and the multiverse crap they're going through. Right, that's what we're talking about. They're going to have to bring in another actor to or change up the whole or change up the Marvel reality as it is now. You know, so they're going through this bizarre. Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? We don't know. So I think that's just sort of reflective. I think of as there's an old saying. It says, as above, so below, because there's always like this reflective archetype narrative that's we think it's imaginary or we think it up, and then yet somehow it can turn out to be real. It's like something happens in the new. Wait a minute, put it this way: there's a movie comes out, and lo and behold, 4 or 5 years down the later, something like you say, oh well, that could never happen. Then 4 or 5 years down the road, yeah, it does happen. And we also do a great show here at the oh golly, freeforms.net. I said that right. Podcast of Champions.
You could leave the
We're doing
plug.
Star Trek. We're talking about Star Trek. And just as a preview for our next Star Trek show, I lived at a time when all those wonderful things we saw in the first season of Star Trek was just so wonderful, gadgets and and it'll be like a thousand years from now before. Well, we've got all those things in our. I'm walking around with something better than a tricorder. It's called a cell phone. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe when you get to be my age and you think back, yeah, I think Lokismom was right about the
Well,
multiverse.
there's no doubt that we're going to at one point say that you were right about many things, Lokismom. We value your opinion on the panel here, and you're certainly bringing some intriguing questions for us to think about. But we've had a really heavy discussion here. We've tried to talk about some of the nuances of Jonathan Major's case, his situation, his status as an incredibly talented, dynamic force who, unfortunately, his career was derailed a little early in the process due to the incident that he was involved in. So, as a part of trying to wrap up our discussion on Jonathan Majors on a lighter note, since the panel was sort of leaning towards recast, and not everyone sort of emphatically wanted that, I do want the panel to sort of take a second to offer up a suggestion to Kevin Feige and the folks at Marvel Studios, if you have one, for who out there you think could be the new Kang if we decided to continue with the multiverse storyline. I'll give you guys a second to think about that while I do some plugs here, some shameless plugs for Sakar. Yeah, we do have a forum. We've said it over and over again. It's a great place to hang out and chat with people about all sorts of pop culture stuff. We are all over the place with Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, Marvel, DC. You follow it, and you're going to be able to find conversation about it on sakar.freeforums.net. So go ahead and check us out there. You can also check us out in the social landscape. We are still doing our thing on Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it these days. We're on Facebook and a bunch of other social channels. We also want to encourage you to subscribe to this channel and to leave comments and like the video. It really, really does help us out. And all of the other shameless plugs that I can fit into this little promo. But now back to the program as scheduled. Let us start with Taylor. Does anyone come to mind? Sky's the limit. No limitations in terms of who might be able to play Kang. If you got more than one suggestion, that's even great too.
As a rule, I consider fan casting to be pointless, but since you asked, we'll make an exception. Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy is Kang. You know what?
Eddie Murphy is Kang. I think he can do it. He's making a comeback. But with the way Hollywood's going these days, it'll probably be Margot Robbie.
Indeed, indeed. I look if he does the laugh. I'm all in. Right. If King has the Eddie Murphy laugh
Kang's evil laugh by Eddie Murphy
done by Eddie Murphy, hey, look,
in the
it
buckwheat
happened.
accent.
Right, his SNL buckwheat accent and Eddie Murphy's signature laugh that has been thrilling us for decades. That could, hey, there's a universe where it happened. So,
I'm king, damn it.
thank you for indulging us, Taylor. Really, truly, thank you for bringing out a suggestion there. Merv, anybody on the scene strike you as someone who could step into the role for Majors and deliver on a formidable and threatening Kang?
I just do want to point out real quick with Taylor's suggestion that Eddie Murphy does have a good history with Disney. So that's not out of the realm of possibility.
There you're
Shrek, he's got that haunted mansion going on or whatever. So, but the first one I thought of was actually a co-star of his in The Harder They Fall, which is a Western based around African American Wild West figures, fictional story. But Lakeith Stanfield, I've only seen him in a couple things, but he's really good in those couple things. And he's
Yeah.
pretty young. He's only 32. He was in Knives Out. I believe he was one of the detectives. In The Harder They Fall, he was one of the main antagonists underneath Idris Elba in that movie. He's also like, I'd never seen it, but the show Atlanta, he was involved in that. So, I mean, he's someone I've seen a very little bit about that, if he came in, I think he could do a pretty good job in like a major role. I'd be really interested to see that casting.
Yeah, that's a very interesting direction to go in. Lakeith Stanfield is picking up a lot of momentum as a young actor out there on the scene. He's been in some incredibly challenging work, and he seems really versatile. Has this really um, there's a kind of quirkiness about him, but I do think he could summon the gravitas to do some different interpretation of Kang. I remember him in particular in Uncut Gems. I forget the name of his character, but that character was so all over the place and so perfectly cast in that film. And of course he was in Get Out and a couple of other films, but yeah, good pick there. uh Grandmaster, your turn. What do you think if you had to recast Kang so that the MCU could move on and we could get back to the thrilling heights of the MCU? Who could step into the role for you?
Purely based on looks, Denzel. But his son wouldn't be too bad either.
Oh wow, okay.
okay.
Maybe a two-hander where we have a younger Kang and an older Kang.
Or you choose Denzel as the new Kang, and you take John David as the new T'Challa. But anyway, I should shut up now.
Indeed. All right. Well, you know what? That's kind of the top of the food chain in the acting world. I don't know if we could get Denzel to come in and do it. He's had this aversion to sci-fi, and like he doesn't want to be in space or like in a costume.
if you can get Harrison Ford to play Red Hulk, you can get Denzel to play Kang.
Right, right. Okay, well then that means that Captain America 4 has to be awesome if we're going to use it as bait to lure Washington into the franchise. But an inspired pick. And great thinking on your feet there, Grandmaster. Last but certainly not least, in terms of picks, Loki's mom. I definitely want to hear from you. Who are you thinking of for replacing Kang if you had to on the recast train?
Well, I really, really love Taylor's idea. I mean, Eddie Murphy. It that didn't even cross my mind. I mean,
The
I was
Beverly
thinking of
Hills
the Denzel
Kang.
Washington, and I even thought maybe just Terrence Howard might could step in. And, he's got an axe to grind anyway. But I think if they're going to recast Tom Hiddleston, with a new, I think that should if they do Eddie Murphy, for Kang, then they should do Jim Carrey for Loki. Um, he's
Right?
he's a real Loki. He definitely was infected by that mask when he wore it. Uh, but yeah, definitely Denzel Washington. I think that was sort of who I was thinking. Back, when you think in your head, when it crosses your mind. But yeah, Yeah, I think of his caliber. The other actor I was thinking in terms, and I don't know, he's already doing the What If, and that's Jeffrey Wright. But we haven't really
Okay.
seen his face, so I think he could. I mean, I think that would be easy to transition that way. Um, because I think he's got a big movie that's just came out, and a lot of good buzz on that. And he might be a little bit milder than what, but he would be a different choice, and definitely I think a great actor who could do something to it.
Indeed. And I, all great picks here. So you guys are on fire. But we have to put Eddie Murphy at the top of the list. That
Yeah,
just
I agree.
the absolute
Gonna
fire.
start a hashtag campaign here.
Yeah.
Hashtag Eddie Murphy for King.
Who can we get to do the fan art, guys? I mean, yeah, we need that Eddie Murphy with blue face on.
Well, I
Man.
mean, if only he were younger, it could have been Bill Cosby, but no.
How about Dave Chappelle?
Oh, Bill Cosby, here we go. Sending people through time with his quaaludes. That, you know what? That's a situation that does not call for any laughter here, guys. But we are trying to end on a positive and lighthearted note here. Um, I want to thank everyone for tuning into this episode of the podcast of Champions today. Hopefully, in this complex discussion that we've had about Jonathan Majors, trying to reflect what the impact of his departure is going to be on the Marvel Cinematic Universe and some of the broader implications there. Hopefully, we did justice for you there. We always want to speak respectfully here. I think you've seen some of the firepower that we've had on the panel in terms of thinking here critically about this situation, being fair and being open minded. Um, don't forget to follow us for more of the same kinds of insightful discussions that we always have on movies and TV shows and everything in between. Until next time, please keep championing. Uh, do your thing. This is Lord Deathman signing out for the podcast of Champions. And before I leave, though, I'm sorry, before I totally leave the scene here, I do want to plug that we are soon going to be doing our review of season 2 of the original series of Star Trek. You definitely don't want to miss that. That's going to be an action packed panel. Everybody who's here is probably going to be on that show, and we're all going to have a lot to say about that. Supremely influential piece of sci-fi television from the late 1960s. I hope you'll tune in. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.